Okay, I should be streaming right now. I'm waiting for my computer to give me verification that's actually working because I had trouble last week. Hello, if you are actually indeed here with me. Amy Peikoff. I'm going to be running solo today because unfortunately Jim Valiant is ill. He had a relapse, even though I was hoping that he'd have time to get better, but instead he had a relapse. So Jim, if you're watching, please get better for us. We would love to see you back here with me. So the other thing that's going on with me is I've got a dog, and maybe some of you guys have heard me talk about her. I have a dog. She's now 16 and a half years old, and she was my dog agility partner. I competed with her for years, and she's been ill lately, and it turns out she's probably got early stage heart disease. So I've been dealing with that. So just all these things are conspiring against me, but nonetheless, I want to come and do a show today. This is going to be none of the above number 2, although I wonder if I should do a none of the above without Jim. I'm kind of winging it. But the show I'm going to do today is going to be fairly brief. It's going to be in what I call a news sandwich format. And if you saw one of my teasers out there on social media, maybe you don't know what news sandwich is. You want to hear what it is. News sandwich is this idea that I like, but haven't gone out there and actually exploited nearly enough. It is taking a piece of bad news, which, I mean, we have to face the bad news. It's out there. It keeps coming at us. They just signed the budget deal yesterday, and we're not sure what the Russia news means. And then Trump, just before I got on, was tweeting some stuff about there's always bad news, right? But maybe keeping up with the news, which I think is a good idea. You should know how your politicians are going to affect your life. Keeping up with the news is easier if you sandwich that bad news in between a couple of good news stories. And that's the idea behind news sandwich, is that you'll have some good news, some bad news, and then some good news on the other side to kind of sandwich it in between, make it more palatable. That's the concept. And if I develop it, I mean, kind of, if I could clone myself, or if I could be really efficient with my time, I would be doing a written little news sandwich at least every day. Or if I was really ambitious, I guess I would get on air every day. But, makeup, and I don't know, I need to get my nails done. And it's like, oh my gosh. So anyway, we'll see if I do it. But let's do a news sandwich today. What I want to do it on is a privacy related topic. What I'm calling it this week just occurred to me for the first time: Hotel Panopticon. And I'll give you the inspiration for the title, Hotel Panopticon. Some of you know I've been deploying a little page that I've had on Facebook for a while. I've had it for years, actually, but I've been making it more active because I'm going to get involved in this case involving the FTC settlement with Facebook. I'm going to really try to do something here. Because I think I have something original to contribute to that case. And I'll talk about what it is in a minute. Anyway, so I've been promoting this page on Facebook now that Facebook lifted the ban on the Ayn Rand bot page. I'm taking a chance. I put a little bit of money behind it. I put an ad out there. And so, of course, this ad is reaching all kinds of people who know nothing about me, nothing about my theory of privacy. And there may be friends of people who are connected to the page. And a lot of people aren't, putting themselves in a bubble on social media. It's not that their friends are all even like-minded with them. So I don't know exactly where this guy came from, but he comes over to the ad, and the ad is public, and he's commented in public, and he says he doesn't believe in a right to privacy. So I'll go ahead and tell you his name is Dan Marks. And my little, legalized privacy page promotion, it just says that I'm having a nonprofit organization, which is what I'm starting, promoting the proper legal protection of privacy via our common law rights to property and contract. And here's what Dan writes. He says, legalized privacy is one of the most ill-conceived notions of which I have ever heard. He says the whole concept puts a capital X in the word oxymoron. For goodness sake, if you do not want your info publicized, do not publish it in a medium. But under no circumstances should anybody expect privacy from a government institution. It is the epitome of a freedom of information media organization. The only info the government should protect is that required for national defense, period. Think of the internet as a billboard. Do not put anything on the internet that you would not put on a billboard. And he says, Jeepers, is this too difficult a concept for people who also expect to vote? So he's very insulting to me. So, I mean, thanks, Dan. That's just sweet of you. And I see, Dan, that you haven't really read any of my work talking about this. But, for me, when I look at someone like Dan says that he thinks only the only information the government should protect is that required for national defense, period. Now, this is the kind of the wrinkle here. So, talking about what information should government protect. The first line of defense for us protecting our information is us, right? And as I talked about, I wrote my dissertation on the right to privacy. And there's one sort of very abstract argument that I have in there, but in it, I am asking myself sort of what is the most basic thing you would do if you wanted to protect a right to privacy, if there was a right to privacy, which I say there's actually not a distinct right to privacy. Privacy is something that we protect using our rights, but it's not itself a right. So what is the most basic thing that you do? If you want to keep something private, you keep it to yourself. And the most private thing that you can have is a thought that's in your head. You just don't communicate it to anybody. You don't embody whatever thought or dream or idea that you have. You don't embody it in any physical form at all. You don't write it down on a paper. You don't even put it in some, bits and bytes and ones and zeros in the computer. Nothing. You put it nowhere. Forget it in the internet, right? So it's the most basic thing. We're the first line of defense for privacy. Now, in terms of the government protecting your privacy, what the government, I believe, should do, and this is my huge mantra, what the government should do, what it used to do, what it doesn't do anymore right now, is it should uphold your right to make contracts or to use your property to protect your privacy. That is government's job. So if you choose to protect a state of privacy for yourself using your rights to property and contracts. So for example, you go to Facebook and you exercise the various controls that they give you to share certain information only within a group or only with your friends or only with subsets of your friends. You make choices there. You are exercising your right to contract with Facebook. Facebook is using all sorts of data about you to sell things or to pretend that they're able to sell things, pretend that they're able, Cambridge Analytica, I always say, they pretended that they were able to influence an election. Were they really? Is Facebook even really able to provide a receptive audience for the ads based on the data that who knows, right? But they think they do. So you are a commodity to them. And in exchange for you giving information about yourself and spending a certain amount of time staring at that screen, then they are supposed to provide you with a certain ability to share selectively, or if you want, share publicly, like I do with a lot of my, my show work and news items and stuff. Just get the word out there about whatever it is that you want to do. That's what they are contracting to do with you. And government's job is to uphold a contract that you make, even if that contract includes keeping things private. So that's what I mean by protecting. Now, and this is also why I say privacy right now is illegal. Because as it stands right now, our government does not recognize your right to make a contract and keep information private as if you hadn't shared it. And what do I mean? There is something called a third-party doctrine in the law right now. And what that doctrine says is that if you share information with a third party at all, so you share anything with anybody on Facebook, even the most select group, then you have shared it per this doctrine, and you have therefore given up any reasonable expectation of privacy in it. That's the sort of term of art, reasonable expectation of privacy. Once you do that, the law says, then the government no longer needs to get a warrant to obtain your information. If the government obtains your information from Facebook without a warrant, It doesn't matter. It's not violating the Fourth Amendment. It doesn't amount to a search, is the way that the doctrine goes. So the doctrine says once you share information, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy in it, no matter in what context you share it. You share it with a so-called third party, it's gone. And the government doesn't need a warrant to get it, because when they get it, it's not a search anymore within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment. It's this doctrine that's in place at the federal level that, to me, means that you don't have a legal right to protect your privacy. Privacy is illegal. And so that's why I call the organization Legalize Privacy, or in effect, what the nonprofit's going to be called is Center for the Legalization of Privacy. What I want to do is bring this back. I want to get rid of the third party doctrine. I'll talk about that in a second. So there's your background. Now, so this is the guy, right? So about Dan, the first thing that comes to my mind is that this guy is going to be the first person in line at what I call Hotel Panopticon. And if you're a privacy geek, you already know what the Panopticon is. If you're not a privacy geek, I'm going to educate you a little bit. Maybe even if you're not a privacy geek, you could be a bit of a philosophy geek, and you know who Jeremy Bentham was. Jeremy Bentham was the first person to really explain a philosophy of utilitarianism, is what we call it. You know utilitarianism probably by the catchphrase, the greatest good for the greatest number. Jeremy Bentham took this very seriously, and what he thought you should do if you were going to be a proper utilitarian is that you should look at each individual action that you were contemplating performing, and you should add up all of the pleasures and pains that would be caused by the action that you were going to perform or not perform. And you'd say, okay, here's all the pleasures and pains that would happen if I was going to perform it. Here's all the pleasures and pains that would result from my not performing it. You try to quantify them, say on a scale of 1 to 10 and everything. And you actually literally add it up. They call it the utilitarian calculus. And you're supposed to do this and then decide what action should you take. Should I cancel my show today? Should I have had the show today? Right? Well, who's going to be happy? Who's going to be disappointed? It's work for me. I don't get to talk to Jim. It's fun to talk to Jim, right? All the different sentient beings, as they call it, who would be affected by your decision. You're supposed to make this calculus. That's Jeremy Bentham. But Jeremy Bentham was also very prolific, and he had a lot of views for legal reform in particular on just a lot of different subjects. So one of the things that he did is he designed what he thought would be an optimal prison, a design for an optimal prison, house all the bad guys. And it was called a panopticon. And what it had was, in the center, you had the little room or chamber or whatever you want to call it for the guards. Or maybe there's one guard, maybe there's several guards, but whoever is in this center chamber, you want him to be able to see and monitor at the same time as many prisoners as possible. How do you do that? The way he wanted to design the prison is there would be radiating spokes out from that center. So it's almost like you have a big circular design, and each spoke is a hallway. And then the prisoners' cells are all along the various hallways that are kind of radiating out from a center chamber where all the guards are. And very efficient, right? Because one guard could see, out of the corner of his eye, or maybe hear or whatever, anything that's going on down any of the different hallways surrounding the chamber where he is. And you could have a multi-floor design with a guard on each floor, and wow, how efficient. But if you're a prisoner, what that means is, instead of, you're down in some hall out of the way, and then the only time that you're actually being actively watched is when the guard is walking by your cell. Instead, you are potentially being watched all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the panopticon, right? And so those of us who are privacy geeks, we like to use this term because the way it is out there now, with the government regulating so many things, getting so much of your data pursuant to regulations. say, regulations of credit card companies that are supposed to protect you from unscrupulous creditors who are going to charge you high interest rates to loan you money, stuff like that, right? They're protecting you. Under the guise of protecting you, they're also gathering information about you. And as we learned under Obama, all it takes is a president to use his pen and phone, and suddenly they're combining databases about you. And so then they have, the credit transactions that you engaged in, and then they have, which toll roads you drove on and when, and all this information they could put together in a big database. And it's analogous, as you can see, to the Panopticon. So, Dan, I'm telling you, you are going to be the first in line to check in to Hotel Panopticon. In fact, it seems like you have already checked in to Hotel Panopticon. Of course, I'm playing on the song Hotel California. I should have stuck it at the blog post at my blog or something, but I'm a native Californian, plus I'm a privacy geek. And so that's what you get. You get Hotel Panopticon. Should I apologize? I don't know. Sorry. Maybe. Anyway, so that's my title. So the question is, what are our prospects for checking out of Hotel Panopticon? Because I think regardless of what your conception of good news is, I would say probably if you're listening to this show right now, your idea of good news is not checking into Hotel Panopticon. What are our prospects either for avoiding checking into Hotel Panopticon, or if we are already there, for checking out? And that's really what this news sandwich is about. So how long-winded was an introduction? That was a very long-winded introduction. Maybe James could have helped me make it shorter, but I don't know. He's also an attorney and kind of a geek like me, so maybe it would have been a lot longer. So let's go into, like I say, the good news, the bad news, the good news. Today, the good news is anything that is propitious for avoiding Hotel Panopticon or for getting us checked the hell out of Hotel Panopticon. And the first story that I've got for you today is from the state of Arizona. According to a court, an appeals court in Arizona residents, at least the state of Arizona, they have a right to, as the headline calls it, internet privacy. And the reason I needed to explain to you the third party doctrine, which sounds so arcane and they don't want me talking about it on Tucker because it's too in the weeds, I'm told, et cetera, et cetera. The reason I had to tell you is, of course, up in, front and center in this news story is the court ruling that there is no third-party doctrine in Arizona. In Arizona, the judges are apparently smart and reasonable enough to realize that sometimes you share information with a third party in a context that you are exchanging information, as we do with Facebook, in exchange for goods and services, or that, giving the information to your bank or to a mortgage lender, for instance, that giving information to them is necessary for them to provide their services to you. And when you do it in that context, it's not that you as an individual expect to lose all privacy. And I mean, Dan does. Dan says that ship has sailed. But I would say that the reasonable person thinks, no, I have given up an expectation of privacy with respect to the person that I've shared it with. And you could say, for example, that if that person, you're sharing information that you are imminently going to commit some horrible crime, that no reasonable person would expect somebody to not share information about you, you're going to go commit some violent crime or something. Yes, of course, that person might go to the police. But, normal everyday context, you and I on Facebook sharing cat pictures with our friends or whatever, we expect that those pictures are going to go to the friends. I mean, obviously some friends are unscrupulous and they're going to be bad and not respect your wishes. And maybe they're going to download your most awesome cat picture and share it out there on one of those photo stock services and make a lot of money on it. And somebody, who knows what they're going to do, right? But they shouldn't be doing that, right? You share it with your friends. Facebook has to have that picture in order to, on your behalf, share it. with your friends. Facebook, maybe you expect these days that they know it's a cat picture because they've got computers that automatically scan, and they say, oh, gee, I think I'm going to sell them the kitty litter or the cat bed, which I've been getting in my feed. I get pet beds because of my dog and everything. That's what you expect that they're going to do. And the state of Arizona seems to figure this out. And this is, kudos to them that you've got an appeals court judge that is, ruling that there is no third party doctrine in Arizona. That means that if the police want information about you, information that you've shared, for instance, with an internet service provider or Facebook or whoever, that they have to get a warrant. It doesn't mean they can never get the information. It just means that they have to go to a judge, get a warrant. That warrant has to be based on probable cause or particularized suspicion. And to me, like I said, that seems like the right answer. You don't give up all expectation of privacy. So here's a quote from one of the judges, Epic, Eppich. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It says, in the internet era, the electronic storage capacity of third parties has, in many cases, replaced the personal desk drawer as the repository of sensitive personal and business information that would unquestionably be protected from warrantless government searches if on a paper desk at home or an office. End quote. Is that awesome? That is so beautiful. Continuing with it, he says, the third-party doctrine allows the government a peek at this information in a way that is the 21st century equivalent of a trip through a home to see what books and magazines the residents read, who they correspond with or call, and who they transact with, and the nature of those transactions, the judge said. Continuing again with his quote, he says, we doubt that the framers of our state constitution intended the government to snoop in our private affairs without obtaining a search warrant. So bravo to the state of Arizona. Now, I've got one caveat to this. And those of you who really want to get, as you might say, in the weeds about this and geek out, if you go to legalizeprivacy.org, I have a post there called My Theory of Privacy. And it's a very short post, and you can get, sort of my overall scope on this. But I've got there linked an article, and it's about the third-party doctrine and what I think the solution is. I think the solution is to get rid of the doctrine, but what I'm counting on is judges not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, because the initial rationale for this doctrine, I think, was good, but it didn't need to be called a third-party doctrine. It doesn't apply to everybody that you share information with, and let me explain why. The doctrine, this third-party doctrine, arose in the context of secret agents infiltrating criminal organizations. And so you can imagine, if you watch The Sopranos, Tony Soprano, he's in that basement where they're making all the noise and trying not to be bugged or whatever. And he's sharing information with one of his co-conspirators. They're going to assassinate somebody, or who knows what they're going to do, some criminal scheme that he has in mind. And he's communicating with his co-conspirator, this guy that's going to help him carry it out. And they're sharing information, right? They're sharing information with each other. And the expectation, of course, it's not always stated explicitly, but often it is. The expectation is that they're going to keep it private as part of this criminal scheme. The arrangement that they're making as they're doing this, even though it's maybe implicit, it's not formally written, etc. Imagine putting it in writing. They never did that. But they're making a contract, right? They're making an oral contract, say. But they're also making what the common law called an illegal contract. They are making a contract, the purpose of which is predominantly criminal. And like I said, go assassinate some guy from a rival mafia or something. That's maybe what they're doing. It's a criminal scheme. And the common law always said that an illegal contract is one that would not be upheld. They're not going to go enforce that. So, Tony Soprano goes try to sue his henchman or whatever and says, oh, well, he said he would assassinate my, rival mafia guy and he didn't. I'm going to sue him for everything he's worth. No, a court is not going to hear this. Similarly, this is why there's so much violence associated with drug trade. It's because drugs are illegal. And so of course, you can't enforce a drug deal in a court of law. And so people resort to vigilante justice on the streets to enforce those drug deals. Yeah, okay, so people are still hearing me. Sorry, I had to check really quick. I had the sinking thought, what if nobody's hearing me? I don't have my headphones on, and so I don't have that reassurance. Sorry. Yeah, so they don't enforce this, right? So it's an illegal contract, and they will not enforce it in a court of law at common law. That's what it says. But it's not just the underlying criminal purpose that is failing to be subject to enforcement. It's going to be the whole contract. Everything about the contract is unenforceable. And so if you're following my chain of reasoning, any side agreement that they have, by the way, let's keep all this private, that's not enforceable according to common law. And so when that's not enforceable as well, you can, of course, share the information with the government. So if Tony Soprano's henchman, fellow co-conspirator, if he wants to turn government informant, he is not breaching any cognizable contract with Tony Soprano. And I don't see that there's any reason the government should have to obtain a warrant to get the information if somebody wants to turn informant when you've got a predominantly criminal scheme. So that's the one wrinkle that I would have. And how would it apply in this Arizona case? I don't think it necessarily would. As I understand the Arizona case, it had to do with child pornography, that there were a bunch of people who were using some sort of a group chat service provided by an internet service provider. And the people within the group would know that it is, because this is a real disgusting criminal scheme. This is child porn, right? So if anybody within the group turned government informant, then the government, I would say, could obtain any information from someone within the group who was part of the criminal scheme, supposedly, without a warrant. That's not a problem. The question is, could they go to the internet service provider and get information based on the IP address of a participant within the group if they don't have a warrant first? And that's what the court is saying. The court is saying no. And I think that's right. I think that's right unless it was a scenario where the internet service provider had reason to know that the only purpose for these people using their particular service was for a criminal purpose. But that's not typically what happens in the case of at the internet service provider level. That might happen at a platform level if the platform that they were using on the internet became aware of it or something. But I'm hoping you're getting the gist of my argument. The gist of my argument is that if anybody who was part of a predominantly criminal arrangement scheme contract, anybody within that was going to share information with the government would not have to obtain a warrant to get it. Why? Because that whole arrangement is an illegal arrangement. The predominant purpose is illegal. The whole arrangement, including side agreements to keep things private, is unenforceable at common law. That's the baby within the third-party doctrine that we need to keep our eye on. Nonetheless, I think this is the right type of ruling, right? We have to keep our eye on that, though, because it is very important, I think, for the government to be able to use secret agents to infiltrate criminal organizations. That sounds like a pragmatic reason. I think that is important. But moreover, there is no right to contract when the purpose of your contract is a criminal purpose. So when a government agent does infiltrate your criminal organization, it is not violating any of your rights when they do that, right? So that, it's not like you have a right to have this enforced, to keep it secret, nothing. You are up to no good. You are about to violate rights yourself. So that's my rationale there. And I'm tying that in somewhat because it's not necessarily applicable to this Arizona case, because as I said, I don't think that they made an error, even if you add that wrinkle that I think needs to be fleshed out in the future. Where it starts to get interesting is where you've got other states ready to follow Arizona. And I understand some other states have done this as well. They're getting rid of the third party doctrine either through litigation like this, or as is perhaps going to happen in the state of New Hampshire. I have a legislative contact in the state of New Hampshire named Josh Okella, and he's talked about a few times that what he wants to do is propose an amendment to the New Hampshire state constitution and, in effect, get rid of the third party doctrine. And one of the challenges, with a constitution, you want to have brief language that sets out the principle accurately. And one of the challenges is coming up with the precise wording that will eliminate the third party doctrine, that will preserve your rights to maintain some privacy with respect to information you share with a third party. However, also acknowledge that if you're sharing it as part of a criminal scheme, the common law of contract is going to apply, that your privacy is not going to be respected in any way, shape, or form if you're up to child pornography or something equally horrible. So that's the challenge. But like I said, the good news is at a state level, we are seeing more and more of this. We are seeing at least state court judges willing to overturn the third party doctrine and realize, as Judge Epic in this case does, that if they can just get all this information that's being shared without a warrant, it's like they can just walk through your house. And in fact, the Supreme Court of the United States at the federal level has recognized in one case, and I'm blanking on the name right now, sorry, but I'll have to get it. They recognize that the information, for instance, that's in your phone is more private, more sensitive, in fact, than the information that somebody would obtain if they walked all through your house, right? So it's amazing that, finally these judges are starting to realize this. Like I said, at the federal level, there's a little bit of movement, but we're not there yet. Where we are, the good news is that we are there at the state level. And for each state that takes a step down this road, that is going to add a little bit more precedent towards getting rid of the third party doctrine, and therefore either avoiding checking into or helping to check us out of Hotel Panopticon, depending on how you look at it. Some people say, that ship has sailed already. I'm not quite there yet. So there is our good news. A few words over at YouTube says, yet another reason to move to Arizona. Bree says, I've never been on Facebook or Twitter. I only go anonymous social media or hide my identity with a VPN. You are perhaps a very smart person. We're talking about flower pictures now. And it's Josh who's talking about flower pictures. Where is this? Oh, government is watching. Yes, of course, always. Hotel Panopticon. Oh, I don't know. I wonder the flower pictures. I don't know. I don't know what Josh was talking about. If you want to tell me, clue me into what you were talking about, Josh. Flower pictures for the Hotel Panopticon? Are we going to make it pretty? I don't want to make it pretty or do anything to it. I just want to check the hell out of Hotel Panopticon. We're not going to beautify it, right? I don't think we are. Anyway, yeah. So Arizona, a lot of people have moved to Arizona. I hear of more and more people moving to Arizona. Oh, I was talking about stealing cat pictures. Okay, so flower pictures, Josh says. Okay, fair enough. Some people share my flower pictures, but I like those, whatever. It's I put them out publicly. So most of them I put on Instagram. So mine aren't so private. Anyway, okay, so that's the good news. And Josh, good for you for pressing forward And he told me, he said, even if it doesn't seem like something popular, he's going to put it out there. I can't imagine that this would not be popular today. I think people are cheering this from Arizona. And of course, now you can be armed with this Arizona Court of Appeals ruling as you go to the floor. This judge is speaking, very knowledgeably and reasonably about what people expect when they engage in this information sharing. I can't pronounce some of your handles here over in YouTube, so I'm going to skip it. Sorry. He says, I live in Las Vegas, could almost walk to Arizona if I wanted to. And next time I move, it'd probably be to Arizona. It's very dry, but it's also very hot. And I think it's too hot for me. I'm a native Southern Californian, and I'm so spoiled here. So I have people telling me, move to Texas. It's so much freer. Arizona, of course, has lower taxes as well. I hear there's, all kinds of great things going on in Arizona, but it's that heat. So, okay. Nelap IDI. Oh gosh, I don't know. I can't do it. He's trying to help me pronounce his handle, and I'm going to fudge it here. Anyway, so there's your good news. Your good news at the state level, we have smart judges, a very smart legislator of New Hampshire who wants to, and I know he's not just smart because of this, privacy, that he agrees with me about this third-party doctrine. That, I'm not saying, oh, he's so smart because he agrees with me. That'd be like a very Trump thing to do, right? I know he's smart because he's got this huge 1,600 and some odd rating in chess that I can't even fathom. So yes, we got very smart state legislator ready to go do the right thing there. State level, we're good. The bad news is that at the federal level, we're not there yet. And so the thing that I've been talking about in the last week or so, which has gotten my hackles up as a privacy geek, is the FTC settlement with Facebook. And you've probably heard me talk about this both with Jim and both with your own last week, so I'm not going to talk too long about it now. Plus, it's the bad news. I don't want to talk about it for too long. But in that FTC settlement, the language creates I would say, substantial risk that the FTC and therefore the Department of Justice, which is allowed to stand in the shoes of the FTC for purposes of the agreement, there's a substantial risk that they can obtain the information that you have shared with Facebook without a warrant. Okay. And moreover, the language says that they say, well, without further leave of court. So once this court order is in place, we've got the FTC and the DOJ, per the terms of the settlement, able to, call up Facebook in effect and take telephone depositions, collecting all sorts of information that they're going to argue is necessary to make sure that Facebook is complying with the terms of the order, et cetera. But there is nothing in that agreement to prevent them from getting information about you. And in fact, a couple of provisions of the agreement refer explicitly to Facebook having or retaining or even being required to retain information about you as an individual user, including metadata of things that you've deleted on Facebook in the event that you haven't deleted your whole account, including individual consents that you have given Facebook with respect to certain types of information and information sharing. They have to retain records of you as a user and that you have given this consent. And imagine, so they're going to say it's sort of like the third-party doctrine on steroids, right? Because not only have you shared it with Facebook, you have given consent to Facebook to engage in certain types of sharing, further sharing of your information. So the government will say, hey, you consented to this, 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 and this. So it's just one step more for them to share it with us. And of course, Facebook is just sharing the information with them pursuant to a valid court order. Substantial risk, as I say. And why is it that we still have a third-party doctrine at the federal level? It's not eradicated yet. All we have so far down that path, even though, think about this. Snowden's revelations, the ones that got us all agitated and upset, understandably. Remember about the NSA, right? Having the back door to Facebook and all these other things. the sharing of our telephone metadata systematically through the FISA orders that aren't based on warrants, et cetera. Bulk data collection by the NSA was made public in 2013. That's over 6 years ago. It was before June of that year. I think May, June of that year is when it became public. We're here 6 years later, and the only significant dent in the doctrine that arguably made that all legal, all of the metadata, bulk metadata collection, et cetera, the only chip that we have is last year, 2018, US versus Carpenter. That was a case that came before the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did limit the third party doctrine, but it did it on very narrow grounds. And the narrow grounds involved, it was a certain type of metadata about you, a certain type of data about you that had to do with your cell phone. It's called cell phone location data. And the cell companies, in order to provide service for you, they will record your location with respect to various cell phone towers that they've got located everywhere, right? And they use this information, right? How many customers throughout the day were close to X cell phone tower, or did their calls get dropped in between this tower and that tower? So they have to make decisions about where are they maybe going to put new towers because coverage is inadequate? Where are they going to upgrade their service first? Like if they're transitioning over to 5G, they'll say, okay, well, we'll transition to 5G on these high demand towers first, something like that, right? So they actually need the location data for a valid business purpose. And if we want good cell phone service, we would want to be able to give that to them. Maybe we want it to be anonymized or pseudonymized as much as possible so that they don't necessarily keep a record of where we as individuals are all the time. But in some form, we want to give them this data. What the government has been doing is requiring them to hold on to the data, maybe in a form, an individualized form, maybe for a length of time longer than the company would have for their business purpose. So they have them keep it. And then, if they want that information, they just do a subpoena or something about you, and they get all of your data. So that's what they had done with Carpenter. And they got, I believe, 127 days of his cell location data from the cell phone service provider. And the Supreme Court held that if they, with respect to location data, obtain 127 days worth of it, that it is a search. They didn't say, okay, anything above 50 days or anything above 60. What we know is that if it's 127 days at least, then the court is going to say it is a search. You do have a reasonable expectation of privacy in at least that much cell phone location data. That's not a huge help, right? Because we don't know. This is, for instance, the Arizona case involved IP data. What about a Google search data? What if it's Google searches for the last 127 days? Is that the same? What if it's Google searches for 30, right? So we don't know how it would apply to, for instance, your Facebook data. And as I said, Facebook is telling, the FTC is telling Facebook that Facebook has to retain all this consent data from you. So how would that fall into it? Because there isn't any separate consent process that you go through with your cell phone, right? All these different factors, this is unsettled law. And so the way that I would see it is that the FTC and the DOJ are counting on slipping this order in, getting it to be enforceable, starting to get as much data about you as they want. There's very broad catch-all terms in the order, and use it. And if they get challenged, they're going to say, oh, the third-party doctrine. You shared it with Facebook. In fact, look, you clicked on all these consents on these days. We can show you. And look at the language of the consent, et cetera. Did you consent to have it shared with the government without a warrant when they have no probable cause or particularized suspicion against you? Probably not, right? You didn't think that's what you were doing. And in fact, I don't know if, if it actually said that explicitly on Facebook, if it said, do you consent to have the information that you're sharing with Facebook today shared with government agencies without a warrant, with no probable cause, with no particularized suspicion? If so, continue. How many people would stay on Facebook that day? I mean, the really addicted ones, they'd still stay, right? But I'd say people would tend to get off. So, anyway, to me, this is unsettled. The order, if it does go into effect, it creates a substantial risk that you are checking into Hotel Panopticon if you are a Facebook user at least. And it's my belief, and Jim, when I was talking to him last week about this, he also believed that if this order goes into effect, if it withstands challenges, that it's going to be used as a template for similar orders that they're going to get on Google and Twitter and everybody else. Why? Because they're not just pursuing this privacy route, right? This is, well, we're going to destroy your privacy in order to protect your privacy. That's what the FTC and the DOJ are telling you right now. One of the tweets that I put out about this, and if you read it, I apologize for saying it again, but Cambridge Analytica says, hey, we're going to buy some Facebook data and then we're going to make a bunch of money off it by pretending that we can sway elections, and share it and everything. And the FTC and the DOJ say, buy, hold my beer, because we don't have to buy it. All we have to do is get our claws into Facebook and pretend that we're protecting everybody's privacy. And suddenly we've got this catch-all language in the order that is going to give us access to the data on the guise that it's necessary for enforcement of the order. So that's the bad news. This is a danger of checking us all into Hotel Panopticon. The way I read the order, it's not clear that you can escape it. Although I guess now if we're going to kind of tie the thing up in court for a while before it could go into effect, then potentially you could still delete your whole Facebook. And if you did it today, for example, then they couldn't get anything. I have toyed with that idea. And in fact, I've uninstalled certain Facebook apps from my phone and everything. But I'm wondering, perhaps to retain standing, I have to continue sharing on Facebook. I don't know. Is that my rationalization, or I'm just addicted to Facebook? I am finding Facebook to be a valuable tool for connecting with people. I'm still, I don't know. Talk about this. So, why did Mark Zuckerberg agree to this agreement? We could go on a whole separate show, but I don't want to get too much in those weeds about this right now. We could, talk about what we think of Mark Zuckerberg in light of but it's all speculation, right? Because we don't know what sort of pressures he faced. We don't know what his context of knowledge is about what the right thing to do is in this situation. We assume that he thought long and hard about it, and that in agreeing to this, he thought he was doing the best that he could for the interests of everybody that he cared about. Still, I'm disappointed. I think even if so, I think this is something you have to stand up against, but I'm disappointed coming from my context of knowledge. So I think I'll just say it, leave it at that. I'd like to share my context of knowledge with him, but I've been sitting on this issue for 20 some odd years, as you'll read in my privacy post at legalizeprivacy.org if you want to check about it. I was set off on this path over 20 years ago, I think. Yeah, over 20 years ago by Leonard Peikoff. So I've been thinking about this for a long time. So what's the good news, right? Got you in the weeds, told you all the bad news. We've got this FTC. The good news is there has already been one organization to challenge the validity of this order, and it's called EPIC. They're the Electronic Privacy Information Center. They're privacy geeks like I am, but they have a very different angle. They, like so many privacy geeks out there, in fact, I have a friend who is also very sympathetic with objectivism, if not an objectivist himself. And he also is not a big fan of Facebook, and in fact is not on Facebook at all. And so, there are people who think Facebook should not get off this easy, for example. And one of the provisions in the settlement order says that if this order goes into effect, that Facebook will have been deemed to have, paid for, done its time with respect to anything up to, I believe it was June 27th or whatever, the date of this order that they signed. One sec, sorry. So Epic's view is that Facebook should not get off that easy, and they have already filed a motion to intervene. It's United States versus Facebook is the case, and they have the proposed settlement, and they link to that and everything. And it says, according to Epic, they say the settlement, quote, is not adequate, reasonable, or appropriate. They explain that the settlement would extinguish more than 26,000 consumer complaints against Facebook pending at the FTC. Epic asked the court for an opportunity for Epic and others to be heard before the settlement is finalized. They filed the original complaint that created the legal authority to the FTC to oversee Facebook. So now you see where their sympathies lie. It says back in 2011, Epic also urged the commission to require Facebook to restore the privacy settings of users, give user access to all the data that Facebook keeps about them, stop making facial recognition profiles without users' consent, et cetera, et cetera. So Epic, supposedly being advocates for your privacy, is trying to get the government to put regulations on Facebook about this. That is their angle. Nonetheless, they have intervened. They're maybe stopping the clock a little bit, and they're going to give me time to go ahead and intervene. And that's the good news, is that maybe we're going to have a chance to challenge this in court. And in particular, what I would like to do is get a proper challenge to the third-party doctrine in as part of this. Because as I said, given the third-party doctrine still being in effect at the federal level and the language within the order that doesn't limit access to user data, right? It has just very broad catch-all terms, and they can get all kinds of data pursuant to this enforcement. There is a risk that the FTC and also the DOJ could obtain your information without a warrant. So the good news is there's already been a trailblazer, not a trailblazer I would have chosen, because again, their angle is pro-regulation. They think Facebook should be hit harder by the government. There should be more oversight, more penalties. My angle is quite different. Sure, I think if Facebook actually did, suppose they committed some kind of fraud on users, and there should have been more disclosures as to what was actually happening with your private data. If that is the case, that there's some sort of fraud and there's some sort of damages, they should pay something to those users, right? Or if there's something deceptive, the court should order Facebook change this deceptive practice, because this is a fraudulent deceptive practice. So there should be remedies. But what I'm saying is that if Facebook has done something wrong, and that has affected user privacy, the solution is not to completely eliminate Facebook user privacy by having all the information readily accessible to government agencies without a warrant. And it's also not to regulate Facebook for a period of 20 years or longer. You go in, you get your remedy from Facebook, and they get their slap on the wrist and you get out. That's what the proper sort of remedy is. So, I think the settlement is all wrong. I think Epic's angle is all wrong. But what they have done now is giving me a path to follow. And I'm going to try to get in there and make very different sorts of arguments that hopefully will carry this trend at the state level, and the trend that is at the federal level in a very tiny way in that Carpenter case. Let's try to flesh it out, and let's try to make it part of federal law that we no longer recognize a third-party doctrine, that we realize that criminal schemes, that any arrangement made pursuant to a criminal scheme is unenforceable. So yeah, if there's secret agents within a criminal scheme at whatever, that's preserved. But this idea that somebody who is a non-criminal, we're not Tony Soprano, we're just on Facebook sharing cat pictures, that somehow the government obtains automatic access to all that data without a warrant in the guise of protecting our privacy. It is just obscene. It really is obscene. And I want to do what I can to stop it. If you want to read more about how, if you want to keep up on the progress of how I'm going to do this, you go to legalizeprivacy.org. That's legalizeprivacy.org. And I've got that over. I don't really have program notes today. I just was throwing things together, sick dog and all the other stuff. But if you go legalizeprivacy.org, you will find everything that I've done so far. All I've got so far is I've got the post about the agreement itself, and I've got the little sketch of my theory of privacy with links to more in-depth treatments of the two aspects of it. The one is the overall grounding of it, where I say that the proper legal protection for privacy is based in property and contract. And then the second link that I've got at my privacy post is me explaining my solution to this third-party doctrine. And as I said, we do need to get rid of it, but either in the guise of scaling it way back, or in recognizing that the foundation for privacy is contract, we still need to preserve that good root of this doctrine. And the good root of this doctrine is that any illegal contract is unenforceable. So if you think you have a right to keep information private as part of a criminal scheme, no. And this connects to some of the other things that I've talked about on other issues. For example, abortion, right? Or if people say, well, abortion is a private matter. If abortion is actually murder, right? Why would you have a right to keep that private? You don't have a right to commit murder simply because you do it privately in your own home or something. No. So, privacy is not something that can be used to mask over anything that is criminal, that can give you rights where they don't exist. It's only where you have valid rights, where you're making a perfectly legal, normal contract in the ordinary course of business, that you should be protected from government intrusion without a warrant. So we'll see what we're going to be able to do. Legalizeprivacy.org. The Facebook is just the first step. I can see myself in the future joining certain other types of litigation, like the Arizona case that you see here in today. Actually, I don't think I put program notes today, but I'll give you, see if I can get the title of the case. It doesn't have the title of the case even. Epic is the name of the judge, but it's not the name of the case. Mixton is the case. That's the name of the Arizona case. But I could see taking up cases like that and trying to extend this idea that there is no third-party doctrine to more states if something like this at the federal level doesn't succeed. But I strongly suspect that if we can get the proper argument before smart judges, including some of the smart Supreme Court judges, that we could get this doctrine overturned or scaled back to the appropriate scope, this criminal scope. And I'll have more to say about that in the future. I don't want to say too much more now. I've geeked out enough as it is today, and I have other geeky things that are picking my brain right now that I'll hold off on for now. I'll wait till Jim comes back, okay? When Jim comes back, we're going to geek out even more, because I've got a couple wrinkles and stuff, and I've got other law topics I want to geek out. So Jim, if you watch this, please get better soon. Come back next week. Give me a chance to sip my coffee during, because otherwise I just talk and talk and talk and talk. And nobody wants that. People want a break. So I'm over at YouTube. If you guys have any questions or comments over on YouTube, put them in now. Otherwise, I'm thinking of calling it a day. It has been nearly an hour. I had intended to go a lot shorter, but I scheduled my Zoom meeting for an hour in case, knowing that I like to talk. So I did. I hope you found this valuable. As I said, Hotel Panopticon, we have either checked in, we're on the verge of checking in, but I think that there is hope of either avoiding checking in or at some point checking out. So thanks for listening, everybody. I'm going to end now right here. And if you liked it, share, share, share. click like here at YouTube, and I will see you next time. I'm hoping with Jim. Take care.